Welcome back, everyone. I am here today with Christopher Linforth, editor of Atticus Review. I'm very excited to be here and thank you all for coming out. How are you today, Christopher? Doing okay?
I'm pretty good. I'm just sitting here in a basement, so it's good.
It's in a basement. It's a good thing. And I saw actually that Atticus Review just had a little interview in the Writer magazine. So congratulations for that.
Yeah, that started kind of just as I actually just took over the editor-in-chief position. A lady reached out from the Writer magazine wanting to interview me about the magazine and all the rest of it. And so there's a little bit of a rush because I'd only been on the job for like 3 days, but I had been familiar with Atticus because I published in there several times over the years and had known Dan Caffro, the owner. So it wasn't, I didn't know anything, but it was kind of like looking through the archives and seeing kind of what had been up to over the last 6 months and so forth, and talking about the new direction for the magazine, which is happening this year. But, yeah.
Okay, wow. So a lot of questions. So you just took over as editor?
In December, yeah.
Okay, and that's really interesting. So you started as a contributor to the journal. Can you talk a little bit about your own process as a contributing writer and then how you got to know the editors and then actually became an editor yourself?
Yeah, so it's kind of a complicated story. So I published some like short, strange pieces in the magazine back in like 2011, 2012, I think, and then maybe a piece in 2020. So over that time, the journal was actually, so there's also a book press associated with it called Atticus Books. And the owner of that, Dan, sold the press and the books to someone else in 2016. And he decided to buy it back in September of 21, I think. The other guy, David, wanted to leave it behind and is more of an IT guy, and Dan wanted to get more back into running the press and the review again. And so I think that happened in September of 21. And I think in November, there was like a call out for like interviews to be editor-chief. And so while I was actually at a writing residency in Oregon, and I went through like the interview process there a couple of times, like maybe a week before Christmas, and got offered the job, but part of it was kind of like renaming the journal's identity and kind of like rethinking its future, because the book press had been on hiatus and Dan wanted to restart the book press. At the same time, he wanted someone to kind of run the journal side and kind of like restructure it and kind of reshape it. So that's what we talked about. And that in that short period is kind of when I was talking to the Writer magazine, even though that interview only appeared a couple of days ago. It was all the way back in December. So we kind of, so I took on the role in December, met the staff, our big meeting then, and kind of been restructuring ever since, which obviously I can talk about in a bit, but that's how I came to the position. Yeah.
Okay. And did you have experience with working behind the scenes with other magazines before?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked during my MFA at Virginia Tech. They actually have a journal called the Minnesota Review, which is kind of strange, which is a journal which has kind of a long and strange history, the Minnesota Review, because it's part critical studies and part creative. Started in Minnesota, been to many universities like Stony Brook, was in Oregon, and Frederick Jameson, the postmodernist, used to run it for a time in the 90s and all this strange stuff. And that was bought from Carnegie Mellon University.
So the Minnesota Review, based at Virginia Tech, was bought by a Pittsburgh university.
Oh, they bought it from Carnegie Mellon, yeah. And it's published by Duke University Press as well.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so I was the fiction editor there for a while. And then I've worked on other magazines and stuff. But this might, my first kind of like editor-in-chief, kind of overseeing the stuff, because I don't usually like read the material coming and leave that to the genre editors unless they need a deciding vote or anything like that. I more read the there's a section on the website called the Attic, and I read contributions for that and edit writers' work for that. It's kind of one of my things that I do.
Okay. So how are you finding the job so far? Is it what you thought it would be?
Yeah, it's good. It depends on a week-to-week basis, because I do it part-time and it's like a paid position. But it kind of like some weeks there's a lot more work than other weeks. And at first it was a lot more work because of restructuring the journal, because we're going from they were publishing work like 4 times a week to now we're a triannual journal. And so the first issue, spring issue, is coming out in mid-April and stuff. So another intense period is coming up, like going over everything, checking everything and so forth. And part of the way to regain the identity of Atticus was to come up with because with pieces just being kind of, there was no real relation to each other that would be published on the 4 times a week. So with the theme, we're gonna have like themes in August and December, which are the internet and language are the 2 themes coming up. And then the April issue is always going to be an unthemed issue and stuff, and kind of gives people an opportunity to see the pieces in relation to each other, and kind of over this year, kind of like crafting that identity for the journal once again. Yeah.
So to back up, the magazine started in 2011. Is that right?
Yeah. It started, yes, the book press started, I think, May 1st. And then Dan wanted a channel that would help promote the books, but also maybe find new writers, book press side, and all the rest of it. So I think, yeah, 2011, yeah. Okay,
and it's been publishing online every day since then, or 4 times a week?
Yeah, they've actually had different formats over the years. They've like online chat book things. They did try many little formats, but I think at least over the last 5 years, it has been, yeah, this 4 times a week style. Yeah,
that's really intense.
Yeah, and so for me, changing it to triannual was also helpful for the genre editors, because they never seem to get a break, and I was like, we need like time on and time off.
Yeah.
Stuff to make things easier on them, but also because they also kind of got into a bit of a like rote routine and stuff, and so I wanted to kind of like change that and make their lives easier.
So it'll still be all online, correct?
Yeah, so there is still an option, I believe. So because Dan's still working out the press side of it and the book side of it, that there might still be possible print best ofs and stuff. So when they publish stuff, they still ask for potential print rights and stuff, one-off print rights. And that stuff's still being worked out. But at the moment, it is, yeah, just online. Yeah.
Okay. And so just to cover the basics for 1 minute, you guys do fiction, poetry, creative nonfiction, mixed media, which is very cool, and I'd like to hear more about that, and the Attic.
Yeah, so and on the Attic, they publish book reviews, and they also publish kind of stuff related to like literary culture and that type of stuff.
Okay.
At the moment, that's mostly, the Attic has mostly been staff contributions, and I've been editing staff contributions, but in the future, I'm going to open that up to other writers who can pitch me kind of ideas and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, so tell us about this change that's happening. It sounds like there's a major sea change underway, kind of like rethinking the workload, the kind of identity of the magazine, publication schedule. How did that come about, and what do you envision that's different for the magazine?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so I was in Oregon doing this interview process, and during the interview process with Dan, he wanted to know what changes I could make, what we could focus on to make the journal kind of reclaim its old identity. Because it used to be, when he started in 2011, it was more countercultural. It was more about like outside writers, rather than academy writers. And yeah, and he really wanted to all the kind of discussions about literature and stuff like that. So he wanted to kind of like get back to that type of stuff rather than just publishing pieces in a very like clockwork fashion, and that kind of, even though they're really good, they didn't really have much relation to one another. And so during our discussions came up with the idea of the triannual, which is an uncommon format. I mean, obviously Triquarterly does it, and there are other ones that have done it. But for me, it kind of fits better with everyone's schedule in terms, rather than a quarterly, which would seem too much, and then a biannual, which didn't seem enough. And so Triquarterly seemed good, and it would have enough kind of like potential there that we could shape things. So the April issue each year is going to be unthemed, and we're also going to be running, I believe, a flash contest in the fall. So in the April of 23 issue, there's going to be the winners of the contest and things like that. And then wanted some type of thing where people would have enough time to write to a theme or have things related to a theme. So in August, we have this internet related theme, so people can have time to kind of write and think about how the internet kind of pervaded their lives, literary culture, that type of stuff. And then December is kind of a bit broader language, which is about kind of different interpretations. So not just like learning language or speaking different languages, but just kind of how it's kind of like shaped their lives in one way or another. And there'll be more details on those things later. So, and hopefully, because the genre editors are now like gathering things for issues, they'll like be more from like a concerted effort to kind of think about what they're actually presenting an issue. So.
Okay. And will you be publishing more content in those issues, or will the magazine be a little more selective?
So it's going to be more selective. I would say, I mean, it was already, I think the acceptance rate was probably less than 2%, I would say. And when I tried to run the numbers about the amount of pieces they would accept and stuff, it would probably be like down to 1% or something. Wow. So it's going to be, yeah, pretty small. At the same time, we did open up opportunities on the Attic. So that's going to be running pieces throughout the year on a wide range of like literary topics. And that's going to be more accessible, and there's a lot more editing. So the pieces I've worked with so far on that, I've often gone through like 3 drafts.
Oh, wow.
So like pretty intensive back and forth, because I want to make sure the quality is there.
Sure.
And at the moment, it's just been an opportunity for Atticus staff to have a venue to write and go through the editorial process. And often the readers have been the people contributing the most and stuff. But yeah, probably in May time, I'm gonna, in the newsletter on social media, put like a call out and get people to pitch stuff. And because we're gonna have obviously months in between the issues, and so we do want stuff on the site, fresh stuff on the site. But it is a, hopefully people send really great stuff, but definitely I've been like pretty rigorous in making sure everything that's published on there is at a high standard. So
sure. Yeah, it sounds like you sort of want to make sure you distinguish it from a kind of casual blog where people just say whatever and actually have it be of up to the standard as the magazine itself. Yeah.
So the type of things people have been a bit bloggy, and then I've been like, no, you need to need to get rid of all these cliches, you need to rewrite all these sentences, and
Right. Right.
and so far I think people have enjoyed the process so far for the most part. But yeah.
So will that have a more frequent publishing schedule?
Yeah, so it's kind of up to me really, because I'd be running that section, but probably like 2 or 3 pieces a week and stuff. So yeah, so normally at the moment it's just once a week. Well, we'll build up to the issue, and then probably in May time, after within the kind of intercession between issues, start running more stuff there per week. And the managing editor, and he does Keen, so he does all the back end stuff, the technological and all that stuff, but he's also running book reviews. So he accepts book reviews and works with writers on book reviews, outside writers, and that also gets published on the Attic as well. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned the newsletter. Are you the writer of the magazine's newsletter?
Yeah. So for the most part, I've read every one but one. So Keen, he went to AWP, and so he wanted to write an AWP special one.
Okay.
So he does that, but I write the newsletter pretty much every week.
I had to ask because one of my readers wrote to me about the Atticus Review newsletter as an example of a great Lit Mag newsletter. So they said the tone was just really informative and kind. So great job with that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So with the theme issues, it sounds like you are a fan of theme issues. I personally like theme issues as well, but I know some writers, they can be sort of controversial. Some writers really don't like theme issues. Was there any kind of disagreement among the staff about that? Do you have any misgivings about doing theme issues? Or are you like fully into it?
So, so the theme issues was my idea. And both the theme ideas were my idea, and I came up with them. And for 2023, the staff actually come up with the theme ideas, but for the first year, I came up with them and said, this is what we're going with. And but I kept them kind of like broad enough and interpretable enough that, because they have a lot of leeway, genre editors and their staff, to come up, decide which pieces going to publish in the magazine. And so it's really kind of like up to them. And so sometimes they come to me and ask me questions about particular pieces, or occasionally they might ask a question about, because we have a new creative nonfiction editor, and asked about how we kind of work diversity into the selections and things like that. And for me, it's up to the genre editors how they operate, because they have a lot of independence and stuff, and so it's up to them how they decide how to do that and stuff. So that was kind of always my approach, was to be very supportive to how things have been done, and while making all these changes as well. And I think so far everyone's been pretty supportive. The unthemed issue, like in April, was also kind of useful because it allowed all the stuff that was in the queue already, and then pieces to be accepted that didn't have to fit any theme or anything like that. So, and it kind of also fit with the idea of doing a contest later in the fall and stuff for the April one to be unthemed. But yeah, so they have kind of what they come up with. Sometimes they will come back and say, can we fit more poetry into the issue because we have this other great poet and blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, because we are a paying journal, we have to like run the numbers and stuff like that. And so far, the owner, Dan, has been very supportive and accommodating, and saying, we can have another person, but we also are going to do things like, we might also publish some more poetry, for example. So I had a lot of great poetry sent in, not in the issue, but just as featured poetry on the site and things like that. But certain things like that, sometimes I run past Dan because he's in charge of the budget and stuff. Okay. And but yeah, so I try and support the editors much, give them as much independence as as they can, and then we kind of like talk things through. So probably sometime in the fall, we'll talk about the themes for next year and kind of decide kind of what we're doing, because I've been kind of always mixed as a writer myself about themes and writing two themes, and really annoyed at journals that come up with themes, but then seem to solicit all or most of the material from writers who write about these things, or writers they want who can then contribute. And for me, I always wanted to make sure everyone's on an equal playing field, that everyone can submit. But that's why I want to give people enough time to be able to write towards the themes. Yeah.
So Atticus Review does not solicit work from writers. Is it all through the slush pile?
It is almost all. The editors are allowed by our policy. So I instituted a policy because before it was kind of a little bit haphazard. Some genre writers would solicit sometimes and some wouldn't. And so basically I've limited solicitations. They solicit one writer per issue, but they don't have to accept the work if they don't like it. But so because I wanted to make sure it was fair to the slush pile, but also I understand sometimes if there is someone that might have a special connection to a particular theme or something they need. So I wanted to give them enough leeway, but kind of like make everything above board, so to speak. So each genre can basically solicit one. They don't have to as well. So I said they don't have to, and some people don't. But again, I just wanted to kind of like lay down some guidelines that would make everything above board and kind of fair to everyone.
Sure. And we have a question here. Are your themed issues limited to the theme, or do you also accept / public work not related to the theme in those issues?
So it is going to be related to theme. As I mentioned, so the spring issue is going to be unthemed each year. And then, the other ones will be related to whatever the theme is. And then, as I mentioned, it depends what type of piece it is. But there are other things like the Attic, things like that, which we're publishing other stuff. But for the most part, it will be huge to whatever theme we have.
Yeah. So if, let's say the theme is the internet and a story comes in and you love it, you love the story, you love what it's doing, but it's not fully as internet focused as some of the other work, will you accept it and put it toward the April open issue, or will you reject it because it's not close to the theme?
Yeah. So I said to the editors, they can do that. They can save it for the unthemed issue. So it's kind of like up to them. And so they can plan ahead. So I know that even though we're not open yet for the language themed issue, they've had some stuff in the unthemed period. The poets, I think, have got some stuff already lined up for the language issue just because they thought it fit well with that theme. So so there is some kind of like leeway there. So I said they can save it for the unthemed issue in April, which obviously is kind of a while away for a writer. But like a year from now, it's kind of a wait. So it'd be up to between the genre editor and particular writer. And then, as I mentioned, sometimes if an editor comes to me and says, I have this really great piece, can we run it as a special? That is also a possibility and stuff. Then the owner wants us to be a little bit more freewheeling and stuff. And to have those issues, but also to have the flexibility and to kind of have like a touch of anarchy and kind of how things go up and happen a bit. So it is also, that is also possible as well. Yeah.
Do you think you might at some point shape the themes? Let's say you're getting a lot of submissions at the open April reading period and everybody's writing about cats. You think you might say, wow, people are really into cats. Let's make a theme issue for our next issue and apply these submissions to that?
That is possible. It really depends on kind of how we do things with the staff. Because as I said, so there's 4 genres, the 4 main genres, and each kind of genre has their own kind of independence, and so it would kind of depend, because we're probably going to think of the theme issue, what the themes are in the fall for the next year, and stuff, and we're going to talk them through, and everyone have their say and things like that. But it is possible, like Atticus before has done like kind of like online chat books and specials of things on the site in the past, and Dan wants to some point start doing that again, so that is a possibility. So there are opportunities for things like that.
Okay. And we have a question here. I think this is what everyone wants to know. Do you have any tips for writers submitting work that might increase chances of getting an acceptance? So what are the best things that a writer can do to increase their likelihood of getting published?
Yeah, good question. So it seems to me that Atticus publishes in prose, so fiction and nonfiction, shorter things. So I think fiction, it says up to 4,000, and nonfiction, they've recently changed to 3,000. But over the last few months, I have noticed fiction in particular really publishes mostly flash fiction, I would say, so under 1,000. So that seems to be their kind of like jam. And they've had a lot of pieces in like best microfiction and best small fictions and all of those things. And so they've won a lot of kind of awards and plaudits, particularly for their fiction, flash fiction. And so I really think, even though we're open to up to 4,000 words, very rarely do they publish, I would say, at the moment, it seems, kind of like longer pieces like that. It definitely seems to be short pieces. So I would say that's for fiction. I say that's probably a good bet, to send in kind of like punchier short pieces. They definitely, I know the editors do work with the writers and do some kind of like language stuff, but for the most part, the piece should be pretty much ready to go and stuff. So, and so yeah, and so I would say, if you look at, because each week I write the newsletter, so I'm reading all the stuff every week and things like that. And yeah, I would say kind of, there's an attention to the language in the fiction, and kind of, and it's like, I'd say on the slightly off kilter side, particularly. Whereas the nonfiction, I would say, is slightly more straightforward. It's a bit more emotional and kind of approaching contemporary topics, but also kind of like, if it is like a common topic, let's say, there's like a more of a sideways glance, slightly different lens on whatever that topic is. But definitely they center the eye. And the head of CNF, Rachel, so she's a Canadian writer, and so she's very much into encouraging like new voices, diverse voices, and everything like that. So, I mean, you can definitely look at the pieces on the site and say, am I writing things similar, in the same vein, or in this same ballpark, I would say, as what's being published on there. And it's more of kind of, I mean, when I was sending out stuff like 10, 12 years ago, you just send the same stuff to every journal, and wouldn't necessarily read those journals, which is fine, because there are so many journals and a lot of them do publish very similar things. But I'd say Atticus definitely has kind of a different identities, but I would say also within the genres themselves, they have slightly different identities. And as mentioned, we also have mixed media, which has its own guidelines, and you don't need to submit for that. Use email, because of, you have to send big files and things like that. But that is a lot more based around like video poetry and kind of hybrid works and things like that. And that's just run by one guy, Matt, who's a professor of like digital writing or something. And so he just works on that by himself a lot of the time. And whereas the other genres like poetry is mostly being a team of Michael and Amber. And the poetry, I would say, as far as I can tell, is like less edgy. It seems very mainstream, and they're just looking like well-crafted poems, as far as I can tell. Whereas I say the fiction is like shorter, it's edgier, it could be slightly weird, sometimes a little bit surreal or magical realism. And then the nonfiction is very like true to life, well-crafted stuff about the eye and some type of topic, something. Yeah.
Mhm. And in listening to you talk, I just realized that 3 of the pieces that I've recently looked at from the Atticus Review are related to childhood, 3 of the fiction pieces. So the story that you referred to in the writer interview.
Okay.
And then today I was looking at the site, I found this amazing story. I forget the writer's name, but it was it was describe your father in 1 sentence.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very long sentence, the entire story. It's like this big of a sentence. And then a former student of mine also had a piece accepted at the Atticus, and it was also related to childhood. But this is not for a theme issue. Is this just sort of a happy coincidence? I imagine.
Yeah.
Not.
So
you're not explicitly looking for work related to it.
No, so each week when I read the pieces and write about them in the newsletter, I'm more surprised sometimes how much synergy there is sometimes between pieces and there is no method there by the editors. They just said these are the pieces for that particular week. And but hopefully in the actual issues, that will seem more cohesive in that way. But yeah, as far as I can tell, each week when I read the stuff, there do seem to be these tangible connections and stuff.
Yeah, that's nice. And so we have a question here. How much do cover letters matter? Well,
so as I said, I don't really, unless called upon to do so, I don't really read the stuff. But when I have read the stuff, like when they've been backed up like a few months ago, I don't look at the cover letters at all. But that's not to say, because basically on Submittable, you have the genre editors and the other editors and then the readers, and they'll basically vote yes, no, maybe. And they put notes in Submittable to each other. And I don't know how much they're paying attention to the cover letters. Not very much, I don't think, but it's best to have a very simple cover letter. Dear editor's name, just my piece, blah, blah, how many words it is. And then there's a very simple bio. Just because cover letters are more kind of your first introduction to the editors and the readers, and shouldn't say anything crazy or appear crazy in the cover letters, or anything like that. So I just keep it pretty simple. I mean, Atticus has published over the years many writers' first pieces and stuff. We had a great piece a couple of months ago, and in nonfiction, and it was this lady's first publication ever, and it was really great piece about her life and her heritage and everything. And yeah, so we're very open to looking at that. If you've been previously published in Atticus, mention that and stuff, just because it might. So the readers kind of like have changed over the years, and the editors have been pretty. Apart from nonfiction, the editors have been there for like 10 years or so. So they've been there for a long time. So so it's good to mention if you've been publishing Atticus before, if that's the case. At the same time, though, it's up to the particular genre editors, and they will be looking at people's votes and people's comments, and then also offer their own say. So I don't know exactly if each piece is done by democracy or not, because I kind of leave the fine details up to them. But yeah, the editors kind of have to say, I mean, for example, there was a piece a couple of months ago where the staff was kind of like split, and the editor was kind of unsure. So I read it and I was like, the piece is good, but it feels like it's still one draft away from being really what it could be and stuff. So occasionally I get called in to talk about that or offer my opinion and stuff. But yeah, so cover letters, I would include them and keep them simple and straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. And we have another question. In your guidelines, you say we are also especially interested in emerging writers. We define this as writers with fewer than 5 publications across all genres. So does 5 publications mean poems published or chapbooks
Mhm.
slash?
So
Like,
this
how do you
is,
define publications,
yeah,
and how do you define emerging writer?
yeah. So this is actually, I came up with this idea back
Mhm.
in December. I said we want to kind of give clearer guidelines because sometimes someone will claim an emerging writer identity and they've had like in poetry, but they've had like 2 novels published by Random House or something. You're just like, you're not really an emerging writer. So I kind of said it's across all genres and stuff. So it's kind of people just really starting out. So 5 publications, I mean, there's some, and I said to the editors, you have some wiggle room and things like that. But a chapbook, I guess, would count as one publication as long as the poems within the chapbook haven't been published in multiple places and things like that. But really, it's just more of a guideline for writers to see who. So they have some leeway. Let's say the writer has some stuff accepted, but it's way down the pipeline. That would take them over the 5. And I said, oh, that's, I mean, it's fine. You've got leeway either way. But it's just more to encourage, yeah, new writers, emerging writers, but to make sure that that people don't kind of like claim that credit if they're being well published in one genre and then spin off in another genre type of thing. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you won't publish people with more than 5
Oh no,
publications.
oh no.
What you're trying to do is emphasize that you're welcoming
Yeah.
to newer writers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just welcoming new writers. I mean, I would say it's not. I kind of, Dick. I saw you had a question there. I would say more related to pieces. I mean, if you're publishing books, I would say you're not an emerging writer, in my opinion, for like literary magazines. You might be like an emerging writer in the world of the literary world, but for the purposes of the journal. So, I mean, all it really means is it just means editors might, it doesn't mean the published piece is going to get published or not published just because you fall under these criteria. It's just that there might be a little bit more kind of like, could we work on this piece enough? How much work does it need to make it publishable and stuff, or to publishable to their particular standards? And or do we give them like a little bit more kind of not credence, but kind of like just a little bit more time just thinking about it. But honestly, on the whole, the piece still has to be good and stuff, emerging writer or not. And it doesn't really pay, as I can tell, it's just more also that allows to kind of promote it. So I would say, as far as I can tell, it doesn't necessarily factor into their decision whether to accept the piece or not, just that we would like, if it does get accepted, to pay special attention to the piece and stuff like that. Yeah.
So at some point, will you consider the cover letter? Like maybe you've accepted a bunch of pieces, but you might go back and say, oh, we don't have any newer these are all people who've published 5 or 6 books. Let's try to include more new writers. Or does the cover letter, is it just purely kind of like a formality?
Yeah, it's just, as far as I can tell, it seems to be just more of a formality and stuff. That normally for me, a cover letter is kind of an introduction to someone and kind of the readers and editors to say, yes, I understand your publication, this is what I'm about, and that you seem basically, yeah, I would say kind of, sometimes I've read cover letters working for the Minnesota Review and other journals where people seem very odd and stuff. And so that's not to say won't accept the piece, but if I'm reading the cover letter first, let's say, and sometimes in the past I have done that, I do kind of maybe look at that piece differently once I'm reading it. If it seems, the cover letter seems very strange, and you'd be surprised how strange they can be sometimes, which I understand. Sometimes people come from outside academia, outside the literary world. They don't know what a cover letter is or should look like and stuff. And But a lot of times in the past, I also didn't look at letters, I just went straight into the piece. But normally a cover letter will kind of show your first skill at writing and your familiarity with might show your familiarity with the journal if you name the editor and things like that. And it just helps. But for me, it's like read the first page of a piece, and that will tell me a lot of things I need to know as I'm working through it and stuff. Yeah.
Great. So can you take us through your editorial process? You mentioned readers. So are there readers before they go to the genre editors? And then if people are uncertain, you come in as sort of the tiebreaker? Or is that not how it is?
So as far as I can tell, each genre has its own slightly different procedures. But first, in submittable, things get assigned to all the staff. So if you look at the masthead, like poetry, there's only 2 poetry people, and there's the editor, and then there's the assistant editor, and then we actually have someone new on board, a new reader. But then in like fiction, there is the main editor, an assistant editor, associate editors, and readers. So it's got a big staff, and it's kind of similar for nonfiction. And as far as I can tell, so the editor will assign all the pieces to all the staff. And it's kind of when the staff, however they fit it into their schedule, will go in and vote. And I've seen editors, I think editors don't like to vote first, even though they might have read the piece, because they don't want to influence the other staff's kind of preferences and kind of their decision, like yes or no. So I think normally, yeah, the readers and the associate and assistant editors all vote, and then the particular head editors also vote. And then I think they do look at everyone's notes and decide, because I've definitely seen pieces that, like looking at submittable, where the editor likes it, but all the rest of the staff voted no, and then they didn't publish it. So there just seemed to be an element of democracy into it. And I also do think they do consider everyone's thoughts and notes and concerns.
And by staff, are you including the readers? Or those count as staff? Okay.
Yeah.
So can you, this is something I hear often, that people are concerned that the first readers are sort of like young ingenues that might not really appreciate a complex or heavy or whatever it is. The initial readers are sort of less experienced and may not be the best judges of the work. So can you sort of give us a sense of who your readers are and put some of those concerns to rest for people?
And I've had the same concerns over the years, sending to places with kind of like staff where you just like it could be an undergrad student or it could be a first year MFA student who I'd say it might tend to be more judgmental and make snap decisions. And so I've lived that for sure, and thinking it probably never even went to particular editors. And for sure that happens at journals and stuff. So Atticus, because we're not like university affiliated or anything like that, we're an independent journal, the staff do go through training with the genre editors and the higher staff about how to kind of decide upon pieces, and they have to think about kind of the strengths and the weaknesses of pieces and put that in the notes. And so often it is, depending on their schedule, the readers who will read the pieces first, but it is the editors will take their thoughts on board. And often, because there are quite a few readers, you could definitely get a wide range of opinions on that. So pieces aren't dismissed. Even if everyone or most people voted no on a piece, the editor will still reads all of the pieces and stuff. And even though I mentioned, sometimes an editor's voted yes, but decided not to publish it, I've also seen pieces in the submittable queue where the editor has kind of thought about the staff's position, but also decided to publish it and stuff. So their views are taken on board, and there is an element of democracy. But at the end of the day, unless the editor's really unsure, which happens very rarely, it's kind of like thinking about things, thinking about the journal and the amount of space and whatnot. So far, I've only been called upon to do like 2 tiebreakers so far. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever encounter a piece that the editors love, but that somehow you feel isn't right for Atticus review? Like it's not, for lack of a better phrase, it's not like on brand with what the magazine is trying to put into the world?
Well, there is, because of kind of the aesthetic of Atticus, we do try and stay away from the word brand and things like that, because it feels like too
Yeah,
too
I get that.
and Dan just wanted kind of a slight sense of kind of anarchy and independence and kind of like countercultural stuff. So it is kind of like a big tent of stuff. And as I said, so the genre editors will often accept pieces or not accept them. They don't run anything past me unless they need to. So they accept the pieces, and then I will only often read them later and stuff.
So it sounds like quality is the main.
Yeah, quality. And as I mentioned, so the fiction and mixed media and poetry editors have been there for like 10 years. The nonfiction editor, Rachel, she was a reader for a long time at Atticus, and then I think since December she has become like the head nonfiction editor. So yeah.
So in terms of, I'll not use the word brand, but I like aesthetic identity also. I think that that's a kind of better term for it. So how is there a way that you would, if you were describing the magazine to someone, maybe someone who wasn't even in the literary world, if you were just like, oh, I do this thing, and here's the kind of work we like to publish, is there a way you could kind of encapsulate it?
Well, kind of like, yeah. So at the beginning, the journal, I tried to be more like McSweeney's Internet Tendency, like back in 2011, and those type of pieces. So slightly strange, slightly meta and quirky. I'd say some of that has gone away. And it definitely has been a kind of trend towards kind of like less McSweeney's-ish and kind of more kind of like quality, sincere pieces, but they still might have like a slight quirky element to them or slightly countercultural element to them. We're definitely very interested in writers who are not part of university systems. And so that's not to say we don't publish academics who write work, but that's why the cover letter, like if someone was a professor at blah blah blah, that doesn't mean anything to us and stuff. But so yeah, more, I'd say kind of like high quality writing, definitely pay massive attention to the quality of writing. I'd say that's kind of like number one, but then it kind of the aesthetic, a kind of identity, yeah, is kind of slightly offbeat, quirky, but still kind of based in, I wouldn't say realism, but writing from that kind of sincerity of realism, I would say. But then how it can have like strange or magical realist, surreal elements as well.
Yeah, maybe as it sounds like from what you're saying that the surreal elements sort of reinforce something sincere. It's not just being surreal and quirky just for its own sake, that there's actually like a genuine sentiment that is
an integral part of the story in that world that has been crafted.
Okay, so we have a question here about response time. What response time do you expect from your genre editors? Duotrope says you average 100 days for responses, which is pretty good. What are the factors in this for your team?
Yeah, that seems slow to me. I haven't looked at Duotrope for a long time, but there's another submission thing called Submission Grinder. And it would depend. I'd say poetry is definitely slower. because it's a much smaller team. So I say, hopefully everyone will hear back within around 3 months and stuff. So people sometimes ask about submittable if it says in progress, if it's changed to in progress. And normally that happens, maybe not in poetry, but in the other genres, like pretty quickly. That just means it's been assigned to everyone. And I'd say looking at things, the fiction and nonfiction, they're big teams, they're very on the ball. People start reading things quickly. But because they try and get as many people as they can, depending on their schedule, to read the pieces, it's normally a reasonably fast time, I say within 3 months. I mean, for fiction, for a long time, was like often within 30 days and stuff, they would have their responses out by, but just because understand that people do simultaneous submit, and we don't want to lose pieces and things like that. And so yeah, we're very much kind of want to make sure we get the pieces that we want. Yeah, but poetry, I do know, does take longer. Small team, the team is like very busy with their lives and stuff, and so, but hopefully we have this new poetry person coming on that will help to speed things up. Yeah.
So here's a question I ask all editors, and you mentioned people being very busy with their lives. So how do you, it sounds like you're also a writer, you're also sending out your work. It sounds like you also have another job, I think, another paying gig. So how do you stay in it? What keeps you going? How do you avoid burnout? I hope you're not experiencing burnout. Sounds like you just started. So that would be a shame if you're already burnt out. But what keeps you doing this work?
Well, yeah, mostly I would say just being, I have weekly meetings with Dan and the managing editor Keen. And so we talk about the issues of the week, things related to the site, how things are progressing. And so kind of like, because we're completely restructuring the journal and all the rest of it, still looking for like things like cover art, we're like paying stipend for cover art and things like that. There's always kind of like things to do, especially in this first year. So kind of like feeling very busy, very motivated about making the changes, making sure it's a success going forward. Because the journal it gets per year like hundreds of thousands. I think maybe like, I don't know if it's like about 200,000 hits a year or something like, no, not 200,000, sorry, 80,000 hits a year. And which is kind of like a lot of people coming to the site and stuff. So that's also keeps us motivated, thinking about, it does have an audience. A lot of people come to the site, view the site, and looking for whatever they're looking for. But yeah, so kind of like me kind of helping the staff, making their lives easier, reimagining the journal, all of these things kind of being very motivating and stuff for me. And yeah, my personal life, I also teach, I also write stuff, promote books and all the rest of it. So it is, I kind of like divide up my time and stuff, yeah, between the things. Yeah.
Yeah, juggling it like we all do. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get more involved with the magazine, could they apply to be a reader? How does that work?
So we put out, so I would say just look out for calls in the newsletter or like on the submittable page. So it is possible we might look for more poetry editors in the next couple of months. I mean, not poetry editors, poetry readers. We have the fiction team has been pretty much set as a big team. Michelle runs it, how she runs it. The nonfiction team, we had a big call out maybe in January, and she brought in 8 new readers in January.
Oh, wow.
And stuff. So at the moment, I think we're set apart for poetry. And so probably after this next issue comes out, there might be a call out for more poetry editors, and it's kind of a commitment of 5 hours a week type thing. Yeah.
Okay, great. And we have actually 2 questions here. Going back to that emerging writer issue, if a writer has published only mainstream academic pieces, do those count against consideration as a new voice?
I'd say we're talking about creative pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that makes sense. If you're still considered an emerging writer if you've published like a ton of academic work, but now you're switching to fiction.
That's very different. Yeah.
Yeah. And second part of this question, I'm looking for the deadline for the internet theme issue, but can't find information on it. So you're open now for that call, and when is the deadline?
It will be 1 month before, so it would be July 15th will be the deadline.
July 15th.
Yeah, and I would also say that we do have, one of the things I instituted, we do have free submission days as well. And so look out for those. I think we've had 1 or 2 so far. And so previously, in up to 21, the previous owner was charging, it was like $5 a submission, which to me was like way too high and just seemed where it's due. So it was reduced down to, I said to Dan, and so we need to reduce that fee as much as we can to $3, and then institute 3 days for everyone and stuff. And I think there is one coming up in May, I believe. I can't remember the exact dates, but there are 3 days throughout the year. And we do advertise those on social media and in the newsletter and things like that. So yeah, so if anyone has any monetary concerns, just look out for those 3 days.
That's great. So did you notice a change in your submissions when you did that?
Yeah, so on the days we've done the 3 days, we advertise it, and there is like a huge submission, because we do get a lot of submissions anyway, but definitely spikes on those days as well. We open up special submittable categories, so the other categories go away, and then we have like the free submission categories. And so that actually comes up in submittable as something slightly different. And it all gets treated the same and stuff. But yeah.
Do you know how many submissions per year you get?
I mean, it is in the thousands.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't added it up myself, but yeah, across all the genres, it's definitely in the thousands. I would say like on the free submission days, I mean, it's like several hundred getting like one day.
Wow, that's great.
And then on an average day across the genres might get anywhere, like all genres together, anywhere I've seen from like 10 to maybe 60 like per day. So like a lot of stuff comes in.
Right. Keeps you guys busy. Yeah. So the call for internet themed work is open now, running till July 15th, and you guys have a contest coming up as well.
That will be much kind of like in the late fall sometime. The details are TBA. I can't say too much, but it will probably be a flash contest. We will try and keep the contest fee as low as possible, because a lot of the staff and me are all writers. We understand that fees, because obviously the chances are kind of like low and winning because there'd be so many people submitting. But one of my thoughts was, if it is a flash contest, we would have a group of finalists and we'll offer publication to several of the finalists, and there will be like cash prizes and all the rest of it, but also keeping the fee as low as possible.
Yeah. Okay. But people can always submit pitches for the Attic also as well.
But that will open up in May and stuff, and so that will be, and that's all free submissions. Anything from the Attic, like book reviews, is all free. The Attic, so it won't pay anything, but it doesn't cost anything to submit or pitch something. And so in May time, I will open that up to kind of like the general public to submit. Yeah.
Great. And in the meantime, people can find you online, of course, the Atticus Review. People should subscribe to the newsletter to get updates, calls for submissions, to read what's going on in the magazine. Find you guys on Twitter at Atticus Review, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And do you have Facebook, Instagram, anything like that?
We do have Facebook. We just restarted the Instagram. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we're across all social media platforms.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. And everybody should check out the magazine, read it. So do you have a subscription option on the site, or is it just
Yeah, no, you can subscribe to the newsletter on the site. Yes,
subscribe to the newsletter? Yeah. Okay.
on MailChimp. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the
Sure.
time. Thank you everyone for coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all so much for your questions. And thank you, Becky. Yeah.
Great questions. Yeah. Thanks, guys.